This is a short video just to summarize the previous videos under the section Bionomy, or the quantum foundations of life and evolution. Basically, if we have a moral code, then the only one that matters is a universal one, because otherwise it's just a personal one and it means nothing. If it's just good for me, then it might as well be whatever I like. It doesn't have to be based on any kind of rational explanation. But there is a moral code, and the only one that matters comes from Darwin and evolution. And a universal law is one that applies to anything in this universe without exception. That is what a law is. When you look at physics and you see a claim that it is a universal law, then it must apply to everything. But unfortunately, in many instances, if you've seen any of the previous videos on physics alone, you see that they contradict themselves. Some of the laws don't apply, and therefore those laws are not universal. They're actually mistakes that we've made. Anyway, this particular law, the universal moral code, it applies equally to you, to me, a pig, or any alien life we know nothing about. The reason I say that is whatever alien life we have in the universe would have had to have followed exactly the same path as we have, because there are only two paths. There's either perpetual gravity or alienated gravity, or the house of cards, one layer built on another one in exactly the path of Darwinian evolution. So whatever else it may be, whatever atomic structure it has, whatever compounds it has, whether it's DNA based or not, it would still have to follow the same process. So a universal law, right or wrong, if one exists, can only come from the laws of physics and evolution. Why? Because gravity, acceleration, mass, energy, etc. are all the same for everything in the universe. So if they are bound by the same laws and they have followed the same path, then they are subject to the same laws. These videos are numbered in a sequence for a reason. If you can, please follow them. You'll understand it much better. But if not, at any given video itself should be able to explain the algorithm for what I claim in the title. And in this particular case, it's the universal law, and therefore I should be able to convince you if one exists to a certain extent. But then if you need more explanation, then please look at the other videos. To establish an objective universal moral code, there are just two moral philosophers we need to worry about. Just these two, in my opinion. If you have read them, all the other Western philosophers, or even Eastern ones, which I don't think there is such a thing, because the principle by which they think is not the same as the Hellenic philosophers, the rational contemplation of reality. This is a subject for later, a video that I've made saying what is it philosophy exactly, so we can separate this, because I believe the modern definition of philosophy has become very, very confused. It's become alienated. So in any case, I think these two are the only ones that matter, and the reason for that is because they are both talking about Darwinian evolution, believe it or not. They didn't know about it, but they are talking about exactly that, and I will prove it to you. Well, if you've seen the videos, you already may be reasonably comfortable with it, but realistically, if you think about where we are now and how much we can see compared to, say, even 50 years ago, when we knew nothing about DNA and we knew nothing about cell biology and nothing really about quantum physics, then we should be able to dismiss all classical philosophers as irrelevant, because they didn't know anything. So, you know, what could they possibly have to contribute other than just guesswork? But that doesn't seem to be the case, because this guy here is incredible, because even after 2,500 years, he is more relevant than anyone else, even a modern thinker, even a modern scientist. He is the guy that is the most relevant, because everybody is a descendant of his way of thinking. You know, if you look at the technology of what classical Athens was like, they just had horses and carriages and spears and shovels. So in terms of our technology, you would think that he should be totally irrelevant. But you know, as you'll see particularly later when we talk about the fourth book, Socionomy, and his philosophy and his social contribution, it is the only one that really matters. He also really, even though he was much later than that, you know, in the 19th century, he should be also more or less irrelevant, because at his time, his event horizon, I'm not sure I'm using the word correctly, but what I mean by that is from his standpoint, the events that he could actually see in the universe, when he didn't have anything about cosmology, about computers, about rockets, about DNA, about cell biology, etc. How the hell could he have seen the principle of Darwinian evolution so clearly? And that also is quite frightening, because the insight of both of these guys is frightening, because they've hit the nail right on the head. Although they're talking about the same thing, but they're talking about two different processes, as you'll see in a minute. They're both talking about eunomia. Now, I will discuss this later on, because I can't discuss everything in the same video, it would be too long. But eunomia is an incredibly powerful and in my opinion, the beginning of Western philosophy, when they realized that there was such a thing as the right order of things, or the good order of things. And this comes with Solon in Athens, although there were other interpretations of it. There's a video later, please see what eunomia is in Solon's eunomia. So knowingly or unknowingly, that is what they are talking about. So the basics of eunomia are discussed later on, but based on what we have seen in the previous videos, Darwin's moral code is obvious. So the principle of Darwin's moral code should be very simple and very obvious, and that is that life is good, death is bad. It's that simple. So you choose either life or you choose death. Since we are life, then obviously we choose life. That is what we struggle every day to do, is to keep living. So these two, although they both agree that life is good and death is bad, they both come to it from a different perspective. He is talking about the mechanism by which life propagates, or alienated gravity propagates, and he is talking about the motive behind which it propagates, because if there is no motive to begin with, there cannot be a process. And I've touched on this before, but we'll discuss this much more later when we talk about human society. So it translates, the basics of what I've just said translates into three universal laws of congregation. So anything in this universe that is capable of our level of thinking, or especially if they can travel through stars, they would have worked this out a long time ago. And this idea that they'll come here and eat us, and they'll come here or probe us, anally and all that kind of nonsense just goes out of the window, because they either will have nothing to do with us because we like animals and cockroaches, or if they are, they consider us to be relevant, then they would have understood these laws of congregation. And they are, just before we touch on these laws, morals only apply to congregations. In other words, they are the laws of interaction. If you were all alone in the universe, whatever you did would be just, because you could choose whatever you want. If you were just there sitting on your own, and there's the galaxy and the universe, whatever you wanted to do to other things would be okay, if there was no other life form. So it only comes with the congregation of life that morals matter. And so ethics are laws of congregation. That's how should we congregate with other life forms, or with each other, or even with ourselves, how we treat our own bodies, if you like, or the cells in our own bodies. And these laws translate essentially to these three simple things. Never congregate events in the universe gravitationally, because all you're going to get is this, the perpetual boom and bust of contraction, and then explosion, contraction, explosion, the gravitational congregation that just basically progresses in a fractal way, in a never-ending fractal way. So never congregate any events gravitationally. You will see what I mean by this when we discuss societies later, and political system, because most of our systems are gravitational. We are not a healthy organism. Our bodies, if you like, our state is riddled with cancer, with lumps of cancer competing against one another. The second law is always congregate symbiotically or eunomically, the right order of things. And you get this if you congregate, because remember the motive of this congregation was that one bacteria ate the other one. This is a eukaryotic cells, in fact a plant cell, where you're seeing the chloroplast inside the nucleus and so on, a complex cell, is that this bacteria swallowed another one, but instead of digesting it, they ended up symbiotically congregated. They rely on one another, and they become infinitely more than they were individually. So always congregate symbiotically. If you can't congregate symbiotically, then keep that event in parallel. Don't let it go gravitational, but keep it in parallel until you find a way of congregating it symbiotically. So this is why, if we have, say, prisons where we lock people up that we cannot congregate symbiotically because they become destructive to the congregation of humans. We lock them up. But what is our intention here? Is our intention to get them back as soon as possible into this level of symbiotic congregation, or are we going to put them there and just torment them and torture them forever and ever, and treat them like animals in cages, in which case we are doing worse than gravitational congregation, because they are now our slaves and we are tormenting them. So it would be better not to have them at all, if you see what I mean. But anyway, that's a separate issue. But in this particular case, those are the three basic laws of congregation that any even remotely intelligent being in the universe, if such a thing exists, would have understood by now. Anyway, that was a short video about those things. If you need a better explanation of everything that I've said here, please get this book. It's free of charge. I want nothing from a Kindle ebook, etc. And my main concern is, as per Socrates, we have to examine our beliefs in life, because otherwise they're just opinions and they mean nothing. And in my view, in my humble view, the education system we have is entirely toxic and malignant. It teaches us nothing about who we are, what we are, and what our obligations are to each other in terms of building humanity, the organism. We just obsess about technology and about going faster and faster. Anyway, thanks.